My paranormal experiences are vast and varied. I grew up in a house that my sister and I thought was haunted because there was one room specifically that none of us really liked to go into, and it was the spare bedroom, which my parents made the guest room while we were growing up. My sister always got a creepy feeling there. I always got a creepy feeling in there, and actually we were having a garage sale at one point, and one of the people who stopped by the garage sale came in and said, "Hey, would you mind if I, take a look at the house? I grew up here, and my sister attempted suicide in the spare bedroom," which was really kind of interesting. But that was well after my first paranormal experience. My first paranormal experience, I was about 10 years old at the time, and we had an Alaskan Malamute growing up, and if anybody knows what an Alaskan Malamute looks like, they look kind of like a wolf. All the bedrooms had hardwood floors, so Grizz would go basically room to room. When he would get too hot in one room, he'd go to the next room, and he most commonly slept in my room. And there was one night where I decided I would try to learn how to sleep with my eyes open, because I was 10. It wasn't the best idea, but it was an idea. And so I'm laying on the left side of my bed, where I normally would sleep next to the wall. I was laying opposite of that, more towards the bedroom window. As I'm laying there, I see a dog appear at the bottom corner of my bed. And it would be where Grizz would lay normally, so I just think, oh, it's just Grizz. He's coming to see me. The dog starts coming towards me, and as it starts coming towards me, I start to realize that, no, it's not my dog. I can see through this animal, and it, in fact, is a wolf, a gray wolf. And it's producing its own glowing gold light. And this dog, the wolf, proceeded to walk next to my bed to where it was straight across from me. And at that point, I'm frightened beyond belief and trying to call for my mother, but I'm so frightened that I couldn't get anything out. Once the wolf proceeded to disappear, I ran into my parents' bedroom, told my mom what happened. She let me sleep in bed with them, and the next day I talked to my parents, and my dad turned around and said, "I think you just saw your spirit guide." And that wolf has been with me ever since, and Dad was right about that. Throughout the years, I would see different things, There was one night I was sitting up in bed, playing on my Game Boy Advanced, and I heard a voice, and I looked over, and there was a face that appeared next to my Game Boy that was made of smoke. And I, at that point, decided, well, it's time to turn in for the night because I don't want to deal with this. And over the years, throughout growing up, I would constantly hear voices having a murmured conversation in the hall at night, and could never find the source. As I got older, I would get up and check that there were no TVs on in the house, and never found the source of it. The next big paranormal experience happened when I was probably in my late teens, somewhere between 15 and 20. I just had this weird sense in the house, like that sense that, you feel something's wrong. Growing up, Dad had always told us that, if you see a spirit or something paranormal, if you tell it to go away, it will leave, because his belief was that ghosts and spirits and things don't have the freedom of choice that we were given when humanity chose to take the apple. Like, we were given the gift of choice at that point. And in some regards, I agree with him there. I think there are some things out there that also have choice, but that's not something I've experienced yet. So, growing up, he had taught us this prayer, which was the white light prayer, and it was, I am one with God, let the white light shine through me, surround me, and protect me, for I am one with God. And when I would get scared, I would say that prayer. And so that night, before I went to bed, I said the prayer, and I remember I was lying in bed. My cat at the time, Darius, used to sharpen his claws on the lazy boy that I had in my bedroom. And I heard the sound of what sounded like him sharpening his claws on this lazy boy. So I yelled at him, and I said, "Darius, knock it off." I kind of went back to sleep a little bit, and I heard it again, only this time it was up on the desk that was directly across from my bed. I had a lot of models and stuff on that desk, so I really didn't want him up there. So I opened my eyes to look over and probably throw a pillow at him, was my thought at the time. And then I see this black mass right next to my bed, just reaching out for me. But around me, in a horizontal and vertical, there's this bubble. And there's 2 lines of runes. One is horizontal and one is vertical. They're all glowing gold. And I could only attribute it to the prayer that Dad had taught us. I kind of gathered myself and got out, go away, and never come back as best I could. And I did, and the thing disappeared. And that was one of the other major experiences I had. The next one, which was really kind of an out-of-body experience and really strange. I was at home. At the time, I was working third shift at the local FedEx, so I would come home and it would be daytime, and I would go to bed. And it was a weekend, so my parents had gone up to their cottage in Michigan, in Hillsdale specifically, and I had gone to bed like I normally would. I lay down to go to sleep. I go to sleep, and I wake up, and I'm in this place. Like, I can't describe the area I'm in. It was just this openness, and I was with this other person, and I felt I was between this person and something that was not good. I won't say evil because I don't know. I can't really quantify that, but it just wasn't good. And I remember in this instance, I said the white light prayer again, and I became the light. And then I turned to this person and said, "It's time to go, Jen." Hugged them, and they basically disappeared. Then I was thrown back into my body almost, so much so that when I flew out of bed, when I came back to my senses, ran into Mom and Dad's room where they had a full-length mirror, and I was looking at my back because I felt like I had been hit the bed with so much force that my back would be just one massive bruise. And it wasn't, which I'm kind of grateful for because that would have been really hard to explain. I called my dad up, when I knew they would be awake. I talked to him about it. He goes, "I don't know how you did it or how this could have happened, but I believe you just crossed a person over and sent them to heaven, basically, or wherever they're going." He goes, and that's something that I had to learn when I went to the Monroe Institute through meditation. Like, they taught us things like that there, but it sounds like you just kind of did it without even knowing what you were doing. I was like, wow, that's some crazy stuff. The most recent experience that I've had, my friend and I were both into the paranormal, and he had talked to me about how, he had done stuff regarding investigating paranormal stuff when he was younger, and I had met him working at Menards. He was actually my assistant manager at the time. And so I said, "Hey, I heard about this bridge called Gibbs Bridge. It's supposedly haunted." I didn't tell him the full story of the bridge because I didn't want to, ruin any potential experience that we could have had there if we decided to go there together. And so my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, went out of town to see her family in Tennessee that she hadn't seen in a long time. And so I said, "Hey, Bruce, you want to go check out that bridge and a couple other spots that, there's some interesting things that I know about?" And so we went on our own little adventure. The weirdest thing was that normally I could just GPS Gibbs Bridge, which was the name of the bridge. The story of the bridge is that there was a woman who was killed on the bridge, and you go there, you turn your car lights off, and you can hear her weeping on the bridge or whatever. It's the Weeping Woman Bridge of our town, basically. Everybody's got one. Every place has one. All the stories are different. It's that local legend. So we're trying to navigate there, getting all kinds of turned around all over the place. It's like something doesn't want us to go there. And we're driving through, and we drive past these spots, and we we're both sensitive to energies and stuff, and we're picking up on stuff as we're going through, and it's like stuff's there. We get turned around like 4 or 5 times. We're about to give up, and we end up at this gas station, and we're talking about it like, man, this is really weird. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I can't figure out what is happening. And we tried it with his GPS, my GPS, and then finally we ended up at the bridge. Since the previous story with becoming the light, now whenever I say that prayer, my skin starts to feel warm. We're walking up the bridge, and I'm like, hold on, let's take a minute, let's protect ourselves, let's say some prayers, make sure we're okay. If we do encounter something, nothing bad's gonna happen to us, because, we'll have a higher power watching over us. So we do. We both, I think I said a Wiccan protection prayer, a Buddhist protection prayer, the prayer that my dad had taught me, and a couple other ones, just to cover all the bases. You never know what you're going to get into. We walk out on the bridge, we're looking at all the graffiti people have painted on the bridge and just going, wow, this is some crazy stuff these people have spray painted on the bridge. And then we both start to, pick up on something. And Bruce says he's picking up on the woman who supposedly died at the bridge. And so he starts talking to her, and he's facing the opposite direction of me and the way I'm facing. And I'm looking off into the other side of the bridge. And I say to him, I'm like, she's not here by choice. There's another darker energy here that's keeping her here. He says, well, what do we do? I don't know. I guess we try to get rid of it the best we can. And I'm just kind of trying to figure out what to do, and I happen to glance down, and here's my wolf again next to me, and he's not happy. He's absolutely angry at whatever is over there. Growling, furs up, I can sense him and see him doing this. So whatever it is, that instantly tells me it's not good. It's not good at all, and this is a situation that needs to be handled with care. So I focus in on this thing while Bruce is talking to the woman and trying to, coax her to move on. While he's talking to her, he turns around and he picks up on the same thing I'm picking up on. And he says, why don't we try to get it to leave? So I focus all my energy that I can on telling this thing, go away. Leave this place. I didn't see it, but what he said he saw was it was like I had fired this blast of energy at this thing and just nailed it. And it was hurting, and it was not happy about that. It didn't want to go. And so I start trying to bring it in closer. And as this happens, he turns around and starts talking to the woman again. And then out of the blue, like both of us had no idea what was going on. We both see these beings come out of nowhere. And the way he describes it is what he saw go to the woman on the opposite side of the bridge from where I was standing, because we're facing off the sides. It walked up to her and put its hand out, and then just it left with her. What I saw on my side, it was like this being just swooped in and just grabbed this other entity and just ripped it away and shredded it as it did, like just absolute obliteration on this thing. It was crazy. Like, we both looked at each other, stopped for a minute and said, did you see that? I said, what did you see? Tell me what you saw, and I'll tell you what I saw. He proceeds to tell me, he's like, I saw this thing, like this person walk up to the woman basically and put its hand out, and almost as if it was saying, come with me. I'm here to help you. Come with me. It's time to go. And he goes, and there was something on its back that it looked like wings. And so we're still not facing each other at this point. I tell him, so here's what I saw. And I tell him, I saw this thing come in out of nowhere, just super fast. It was like it just grabbed that thing and ripped it away. And as it did, it ripped it apart too. Like, it was crazy. I've never seen anything like this. it looked like it had wings on its back. It had wings. And I'm like, the only thing I can think of in this situation is that was some kind of angel or archangel, because that's the only thing I can think of that would have that much power to do something like that. And the even crazier part was I finally turned around and faced him, and on the side of the bridge where he was facing, it was fog. Just absolute fog everywhere. And it was warm. Like, you could put your hand off the side of the bridge and the air was legitimately warmer on that side of the bridge. But when you walk to the side of the bridge I was facing, it was cold. It was bitter cold. I've never experienced anything like that. It was the most amazing experience paranormal-wise that I think I've ever had, and I don't know that there will ever be anything that would top that, other than like seeing Bigfoot or Dogman or some other cryptid that would be comparable. And so we go driving around again, and we're talking, and he goes, do you think that could have been something somebody sent to protect us with all the weird stuff that, was going on when we were trying to get here? Do you think, like, maybe your dad knew? Because we both knew, like, that my dad was very, very spiritually grounded and very spiritually connected, to where he knew a lot more than he would let on. And I don't know, but I don't think he has the power to do something like that. But I don't know. And then he said, well, do you think it was Owen? Which, at the time, Bruce had a special needs son, or adopted son, named Owen. And the first time I met the kid, it was like you got shot in the chest with a burst of energy. And then he was like, oh, you're a friend. Like, we both still talk about Owen to this day, and talk about how, he had a direct line to something. Like, that kid was special. Not just in the fact that he had a disability, but he could connect to things on a level that we couldn't understand in any way. And I honestly believe he had a direct line to God, or something of that magnitude. And he's like, do you think it could have been Owen protecting us? I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know. And so we're driving back, and we're going through the spots that, we had sensed things earlier, and it was quiet. It was absolute silence. It was like everything in the area had taken off and was just running and scared out of its mind and just gone because of what had just happened. We're talking, and I glance up and look at the rearview mirror, and I looked at him like, son of a gun. He's like, what? I'm like, I just looked in the rearview. He goes, yeah? What'd you see? I'm like, my wolf is sitting in the back seat with a big freaking grin on its face. Like, the best grin that a dog can do. I've had this thing with me for years. I know it. I know how it reacts to things. I've talked to it before through meditation. And he goes, well, what does that mean? I'm like, it means two things. One, he knows exactly what that was, and he's not going to tell me. And two, that was something extremely powerful, but also extremely good. So the next day comes around, and of course, I call up Dad, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing today? And he goes, nothing much, just hanging out at the house. I'm like, can I come over and talk to you about something? And he's like, yeah, sure. Come on over, just stop by and we'll chat. Now, the follow-up to that experience at the bridge at Gibbs was I went home and I went to bed. As I'm sleeping, I wake up to this brilliant gold light in my room, and it's coming from the wall. And I happen to roll over, and there's a being standing in my room. I got the sense that it had basically come to say, hey, welcome back. It's good to see you again. It's good to see you investigating this stuff again. But at the time, I was so confused and concerned, and I'm like, go away. Get out of my space. Don't want this. And so it disappeared, and I went back to sleep. And then I contacted Dad the next day and went over to their house and talked to him about it. He said to me, he goes, I'm pretty sure what you saw were archangels. I've met beings of light through meditation, and for you to have that kind of an experience with something like that, that's amazing. Like that's wonderful. Like you should hold on to that and be cherishing that experience. It's an impressive experience to have. And I asked him, I'm like, did you send them? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, I know you have spiritual connection and things that I don't fully understand. He goes, no, I didn't. I don't even know if I could do that if I tried. After that, like, I had been trying to get Bruce with Dad to meet him, and sadly, it wasn't too much longer after that experience. I think it was maybe a couple years or more, and I'd been trying to get Dad to the bridge for a while to just go check it out with me. Sadly, Dad passed away. And that was tough, dealing with that loss, because he and I were extremely close. After that, Mom had been going through some of Dad's old things, and she had found a cross that I had given him, that I had bought on a trip to Mexico. It was a silver cross, a simple little silver cross. And she said, hey, do you want this? And I said, yeah, I'll take it. It's a while goes by, the wound is slowly healing of the loss of my father. I'm sleeping one night next to my girlfriend, who again is now my wife. It's just about getting to that time where my alarm's about to go off, or, something. Like, I was kind of starting to stir, and I feel something pulling on Dad's cross from behind me. The only thing behind me is the edge of the bed and the closet wall. And there's nothing that should be there. We don't have any kids. Our cats are not going to mess with me while I'm sleeping or do something like that. And if they were, I would feel them on the bed, because that's the only way they could do it. They're not big enough to reach it from the floor. The bed was too high. I roll over and there's nothing there. I roll over swinging, thinking somebody's behind me and somebody's got in the apartment, and I'm freaked out, and there's nothing there. I was expecting to connect with something, and there was nothing. It was absolutely mind-boggling. After that, I saged the apartment that day, because I didn't want anything in my space, because I'm completely okay experiencing anything paranormal. It's when it starts potentially affecting my family that I get concerned. I don't want that. I will stand the line to protect them from anything. I will hold that line, and I will make sure that they are completely protected before anything gets near them. And that's how I've always been. And that's how I felt about my girlfriend. So yeah, that happened. And that was the third experience that had happened at the apartment that we were living in at the time. The first one was shortly after we moved in. We were sleeping one night, and I remember waking up, and she says I was dreaming. I don't know. If I was, it was extremely vivid, and I saw something akin to, all I can say is a demon standing over her that looked at me and said, I will devour her. And again, wanting to protect her, I looked at it and said, like, over my dead body. And I swung at it. And apparently, she says I punched her. I don't remember connecting with anything. I just remember that was the first time I saged the apartment. The second time was after the thing at Gibbs Bridge happened, and the thing appeared in my bedroom, or in our bedroom. I saged the apartment then as well. And the third time was when the thing had grabbed my necklace and was messing with it. Shortly after that, we were still living at the apartment, and I can't remember how long it was, but my wife got pregnant with our first child, our daughter Nora. I had come home one day, and I walk in the door, and she wasn't home yet, but I didn't know at the time. And I hear someone say, hello, welcome home. And of course, it's coming from the living room of the apartment, which I'm walking right into basically the living room, because the entryway splits. To the left is the living room, and straight ahead is the kitchen. And I can't see around the kitchen wall to see if she's like sitting on the couch the way it was set up. But the thing that set me on edge was it wasn't her voice that said, welcome home. At that point, I was like, okay, what is this? Who is in my apartment? What's going on? Is there a TV on? What's going on? I searched the whole apartment. Nothing. No one was there. And the floors were solid enough to where you wouldn't hear the people below you unless they were banging on the ceiling or screaming really loud. For someone to scream, hello, welcome home, that bad, that I would hear it upstairs, just didn't make any sense. And it didn't sound like it was coming from below. It sounded like it was right there in front of me. And then another one that happened in the apartment was before my father had heart surgery. I had taken some time off work to deal with the whole, here's my dad going through major surgery and he could die from this, and like possibly coming to terms with the fact that my dad could die from a heart condition. I remember I was sitting in the living room playing video games, trying to relax. I'm sitting on the floor, and I just said a prayer for Dad, that he would be looked after, taken care of, all would end well, that kind of thing. And then this burst of wind comes up from the floor around me. I say wind, but it was more like energy coming up through the floor. And there was no reason that should be a thing. And then I felt like someone was hugging me and saying, it'll be okay. Everything's going to be fine. It's all going to work out the way it's supposed to. That's basically it for apartment experiences. There was one experience where it involved my mom, my dad, myself. My sister had moved out at the time, so I think my mom was the first to see it. She saw this figure with like a white t-shirt. I think she said blonde hair and like blue jeans, just like an average Joe looking guy, like figure outside the house. And she told my dad about it. Well, my dad saw the same figure on the back porch when he was out smoking one night. He's like, well, that's weird. I, at one point, was doing something in the house, like in the living room. I had looked towards our computer room and saw that this white figure again. And I told my parents, and they're like, huh. And that was one of the few times that I remember my dad actually saging the house, because the fact that all three of us were seeing this, he didn't like that. And he's like, this isn't something I want near my family. I don't know what it is. I don't like it. So he saged the house. And, what we would say, when we sage something or sage the house is, only light and love may enter the space. All other energies are unwelcome, basically, is what we would put out. He did that. That's one of the only times I know of him saging the house. I'm gonna backtrack here because I just remembered another experience I had as a child, another couple actually. When I was real young, we were getting ready to go somewhere. I can't remember if it was a funeral or what it was, but you had to dress up for whatever we were going to do. I was getting ready, my parents were getting ready, my sister was getting ready, and I remember I had come downstairs for something. I think it was to sit down and put my shoes on. And I was really, really quite young. I could tie my shoes at the time, but I was still pretty young. I remember hearing someone like throwing up, but it was coming from outside the front window. And I remember looking out the front window and there was nothing there. I asked Dad if Danny was okay. I asked my mom if she was okay. It sounded like a woman throwing up. And everybody was fine. Like, I told them what happened and nobody knew. Everybody was perfectly fine. A while later, after I had seen the wolf in my bedroom, I was talking to my dad in the living room at their house. So we're talking. I forget what the conversation was even. Like, it was just a random conversation. I happened to look over and I see this woman outside in the street across from us at our neighbor's property, pulling weeds out of the space between the curb and the yard. Like, she was weeding that little section there. And it was right in front of the house. There was this couple with their dog, and they came walking by, and then the lady was just gone. She was just gone. I looked at my dad, I'm like, did you see the lady out there? And it wasn't like she could have gotten up the driveway, because the driveway was right in front of us as well. Like, the drive she would have had to walk up, I would have easily seen her passing behind the people going in front of her. She was just gone, as if she was never there to begin with. My dad said, no, I didn't see anybody there. I can remember, growing up, I mentioned the voices before, and I remember asking my sister about it, and she said, no, I've never heard voices, and no, I wasn't like awake talking to someone the other night because she used to stay up late and talk to her boyfriends on the phone and stuff. Typical teenager stuff. Because we're 6 years apart, and I was younger than she was, so we kind of kept each other's secrets when we do stuff like that. That was the one that made me question whether I was crazy or not. Until I brought it up to my parents, and they said, no, we've never heard that, but have you ever, been able to decipher what they're saying? And I said, no, it's just mumbling. And when I told my dad that, he said, I kind of wonder if you're a little bit psychic. Like, you've got some sort of ability, and that's what we chalked it up to. Like, it was never, a question of craziness. The way we were raised, our family was very open-minded and we were religious, and we believe in God, and we believe in prayer and that kind of thing, but we're not going to say, hey, this is bad because you can see these things. You must need some extra prayer or exorcism or stuff like that. We're kind of middle ground because our family is made up of so many different religions. It was just one of those things where, we didn't really think it was potential craziness. My friends had even had experiences at our house. Like, my buddy David and I used to build forts in the basement. We would sleep downstairs because it was cooler during the summer. And we'd make forts out of the couches down there, and we'd sleep down there. We'd just go down there and build forts or, play video games, whatever. There was one day where we were sitting down there just hanging out, just kind of watching stuff because I told him about my experiences. And he saw a wolf of his own in the basement while I was upstairs. And after that, like, my parents said, we're going to go to our friend's house out in Perrysburg. You're coming along, so get your stuff. Let's go. He's going to have to leave. And so I went down, or I told David this, and then I remembered we'd been playing Game Boy down in the basement. So I had to go down and get my Game Boy. He went with me, we were just talking. And this was when I was in high school. And I remember I had turned after grabbing my Game Boy to go back up the basement stairs. And as I did, I saw this head-sized orb of light come out of the laundry room and to the base of the stairs and then go back. And it wasn't like I had spun around super fast and it was just, I was seeing the trail from his head. It was a glowing ball of light that was the size of a person's head, and it came out of the laundry room and went back. We both just dubbed that entity Bob and chalked him up to, being the house ghost or whatever. Like, we didn't really think anything of it. And then a while later, we met a friend of David introduced me to a friend of his named John, who at the time I didn't know he was stealing stuff from the house when he would come over and spend the night, and we'd all hang out and play video games. I learned that years later, which is unfortunate, but is what it is. We had told him about Bob. Be courteous to the house ghost. Be courteous to Bob. Don't mess with things in the house. Don't try and be a jerk to anybody here because it's going to upset Bob. Well, he would sleep in the guest room like normal. And so anytime he would stay over, he would always say it sounded like someone was walking around the room with boots on. But when we first told him about Bob, he directly confronted Bob and said, I don't believe in you, this, that, and the other thing. Come show me you're real type of stuff. Like, he'd provoked him. That night was the first time he had that experience. He's like, it was like somebody was stomping around the room in freaking combat boots, pounding on the door, like just absolute craziness. I never heard any of it. My room was right down the hall. And David, when he would spend the night, he would sleep in the spare bedroom occasionally. And there was one time he had made an off-the-cuff joke about Bob, or, said something that, could have been construed as offensive. And he remembers waking up in the morning to his cell phone alarm going off. He'd put his cell phone on the nightstand next to the bed. He found it all the way across the room, on the opposite side of the room, on the end of the ironing board by the door to come into the room. After that, he got up and he's like, I'm sorry, Bob, if I offended you. Didn't mean to. It was just a joke. Please don't take offense. After that, occasionally he'd stay up there and he'd hear, somebody walk around the room like with sound like boots on or, that kind of thing. But other than that, he didn't really have any issues with Bob. But John, on the other hand, constantly, anytime he would stay over, Bob was just all over him. Just constantly just bothering him. To the point where finally he said, you know what? I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for what I did, please just leave me alone and stop harassing me. Didn't stop, but that's because, in my opinion, Bob was the guardian of the house. He realized that John was a threat to the household, or the entity realized that he was a threat to the household, I should say. And so he was trying to get him to leave and not come back. And that was the whole thing. It wasn't too long after that John really kind of stopped coming over and staying over. There were other things involved that I won't get into that led to that, but he wouldn't stay over. He's like, and when we'd ask him why, he's like, I don't want to deal with that crazy stuff anymore. Like, I can't. Like, it's driving me crazy. I don't know how you can deal with that. And I told him, like, you just gotta be respectful. You can't be a jerk. You can't be mean. And you were disrespectful, so this is what happens. And we warned you that would happen. Since Dad has passed, there have been a few times, like recently, my wife and I will come home and smell of the cigarettes he used to smoke. When my wife met him, he was smoking a vape, so she didn't really get the smell of the cigarettes he would smoke. But growing up with him, he smoked a specific brand of cigarette and had a specific smell to it. And I remember there was one day that she came home from the store and she said she couldn't figure out why she was smelling cigarette smoke in her car. She wasn't sure what was going on. She hadn't smoked since high school, and that was only like once to take a drag to try it out. She said, let's go to the store. There's a couple more things I want to pick up. So we go to the store to pick up some storage totes to just organize things in the house. We get back to the car after we'd gotten out and gone to the store, gotten our stuff, and sure as all get out, it smells like cigarette smoke in her car. And I looked at her and I grinned, and the first words out of my mouth were, "Hi, Dad. How's it going?" And she just looked at me confused and said, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "That smells like Dad's cigarettes. It's the specific smell of the cigarette brand he used to smoke." And she goes, "No." I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what that is. Congratulations, honey. This is your first paranormal experience." And then there have been a few times now where we've come home from like a long trip, or, you know, we've come home, we'll smell that smell, and I'll just smile, say, "Hey, Dad, how's it going? Glad to see you stop by." That's really it for my paranormal experiences there. I can't think of any more. Glad I could contribute to this YouTube series and this show. Been a long time listener of the Dogman stuff, and that's all I have to say for now.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.